Story 1. My wife related this story to me when I prompted her for one of the creepiest things that's ever happened to her. True story. A couple of years before we got married, she went with her parents and a couple of aunts to Mecca to perform the Hajj pilgrimage. At the hotel they were staying in were several families from Mozambique, several of whom were known to my wife's family. The daughter of one of these families, who was about 22 and married, was just staying in her room and not performing any of the Hajj rituals, and not performing any prayers at all. I'm not going to go into the details of the Hajj. If you're really interested, hit up Wikipedia. It's ancillary to the event anyhow. The desperate parents of this young woman spoke to the owners of the hotel, and they got hold of someone who got hold of this old Indian wise man who comes by the hotel. All of what happens next takes place in the hotel foyer and can be corroborated by my wife's parents and aunts. The old guy comes in and without any questions or preamble says to the hotel owner, "There's a woman staying in the hotel by the name of..." He gives details about a girl of about 18 or 20, and it's confirmed that there is such a person staying at the hotel. Whether he found out somehow or just knew is left for debate. "Bring her and her parents here," he tells them. So the bewildered young girl and her bewildered parents come down to the foyer. Turns out the family are from Mozambique, and the only language the girl speaks is Portuguese. This is common in Mozambique, apparently. No matter, apparently. I'm not sure if he used an interpreter here, but he pulls this girl aside, we'll call her Girl A for expediency's sake, and has a chat with her. Apparently, she had been going out with this guy back home, and his mom was having trouble accepting her. One of the reasons she'd come on this pilgrimage was to find the peace within herself to accept whatever answer came from the guy. Anyhow, the old guru tells her, "I know about what's happening back home, and I want you to know that the young man you want to marry is putting his foot down and telling his mother that you're the one he wants to settle down with. I'm telling you this because I need your mind at peace." Once again, no idea how he knew all this, because the first time any of these people saw him was when he came striding into the hotel. Girl A seems happy and agrees to work with the guy. According to the guru, Girl A is somehow susceptible to being possessed by Jinn, and that's a scary enough thought for me. So he sits her down in front of the troubled young woman, we'll call her T, and starts reciting something in Arabic. Girl A closes her eyes for a short bit while this guy is reciting, and suddenly she starts having what looks like an epileptic fit, and obviously her parents are freaking out. Suddenly she stops and sits back. Old guy says, in Urdu, "Can you hear me?" Girl A, in a very distinct male voice, says in perfect Urdu, "Yes." Bear in mind that the only language she knows is Portuguese, so the fact that she's now talking in Urdu is something else entirely. He then says, "Can you see what's stopping Girl T from performing her Hajj?" Girl A, in this man's voice, says, "It's a big, black Jinn inside her. A man she was seeing, but then broke up with to get married to her current husband, told his mom about the breakup. His mom paid a practitioner of some black arts to get a Jinn to interfere with the girl's life and convince her to come back to him. Long lot of details short, this big, black Jinn was causing trouble in her life by preventing her from praying, sleeping with her husband, and just causing her to stop and have seizures at random times and places. The old guy considers this information and then says, "Can you get rid of it?" The Jinn says, "I can burn him." The old guy says, "Do it." Suddenly, Girl T starts screaming and rolling around on the floor, as if in the most horrific agony ever. Now her husband and parents are freaking out, but the old guy tells them to keep back. And all the time Girl A is giving a running commentary. His feet are now ashes. His thighs are burned. His torso burned. His arms are gone. As the Jinn says, it's done, Girl T stops screaming. The old guy says to Girl A, thank you, and then starts reciting in more Arabic, and again she looks like she's having a fit. Then she stops and opens her eyes and says, okay, so when are we starting? Her freaked out parents take her away. The old guy tells the parents of Girl T, make sure she sleeps and she'll be fine by the morning. And she was. Still, my wife says the way the girls' voices changed to men's voices was creepy. Story 2. I usually don't answer phone calls from family back home as it's almost always family asking for something, and usually that something is money. But one night I got a call from my cousin at 2 a.m. I declined the call and silenced my phone. When I woke up, I had 20 missed calls. This must be serious, I thought to myself. I sat on the edge of my bed and called him back. There was no answer. I checked my voice messages. None of the messages he left gave any insight. It was just him panicking. I called my mom to see if she knew what was going on. She said she didn't know. Then when I got home, he called again. Ollie, you have to help me. Heron shouted. You have to. What happened? What's wrong? I asked him. I'm on trial. I don't even know what I did. It's not fair. I can't even see them. Nothing Heron said made any sense, but I just let him talk. I rolled my eyes when I heard he was in court again. He had a way of getting into trouble. Well, how much is the bail? I get paid this week. Ollie, listen to me, man. It's not like that. No, it's fine. I'll send it this week. I was on trial by Jinn. They kidnapped me, and there was a whole jury. Yeah, and they were so mad at me. Heron, what the hell are you talking about? I was getting annoyed at this point. He is a prankster, but this has gone too far. That's when he started crying. In all my years of knowing him and visiting him back home, I have never heard or seen him cry. You don't understand. He cried.
I'm sorry.
Tell me what happened. I'll listen. I'm sorry. We talked for almost 2 hours. I had to Google everything after we spoke. I heard of Jinn before, but I never knew they were real. Apparently, Heron was dumping trash in one area by his house. Because humans can't physically see Jinn, he didn't know that he threw some trash on one of their family members. They went home and complained, and then the leaders or chief, I don't know what you'd call them, well, they decided to hold a trial. Heron woke up one night in great pain and incredibly dizzy to realize he was being dragged by his feet toward a cave. He tried everything to get free, but nothing worked. Finally, when he arrived, he saw some figures. Then he saw a jury of 12. He said they weren't quite human and they weren't quite animals. That's when he wondered if they could be Jinn. Only one could communicate with Heron. After he panicked upon seeing them, one explained why he was brought there. He explained to Heron that he had been throwing trash in an area where one of their children was sleeping. Heron apologized, pleaded, and begged for mercy. He explained that he couldn't see Jinn, and he didn't mean to hurt anyone. The Jinn gathered together in a circle and excluded Heron. That's when they decided his punishment. Ollie, I wish the punishment had been a beating or something. I could handle that. I hesitated to ask, what did they decide on? I can now see Jinn. At all times, everywhere. They thought that'd resolve the issue, and I'd never make the mistake of dumping anything on them again. Well, did it? Of course, but now I see them everywhere, all the time. It's scary. I can't handle it. I'm always scared. I don't leave the house anymore, but sometimes they walk by my window. Sometimes they're in my room. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help. Just believe me. Nobody else believes me. I have to call you back. Heron's tone changed. He hung up and I didn't hear from him again. I've decided to take time off work and go back home to see if I can find him. I need to know if he's okay. Story 3. Hello. I have many stories to share. This is only one of them. I'm a Middle Eastern woman residing in one of the Arab Gulf states. Though considered Muslim, my family has never observed religious commandments. The only time I saw my father pray was once in the month of Ramadan, about 20 years ago, when I was 6 years old. Me and my younger brother were so fascinated by this strange ritual we were seeing our father perform that our absorbed staring made my father burst into laughter and order us out of the room so he could pray in peace. Though we were not religious, I remember my mother introducing us to some topics related to religion. One was the stories of the different prophets. I remember liking the Prophet Yusuf because I was fascinated by the idea of someone so beautiful you'd accidentally cut your hands as you peeled fruit in your awe of their beauty. Also because my kid mind concluded that the palm lines on our hands were a result of those spellbound women cutting up the palms of their hands. I don't know why I thought that. My mother also taught us about the different creatures God created. The angels, from light, humans, from dirt, and Iblis, arch nemesis of humanity, from fire. She never mentioned anything about the Jinn. I don't remember who warned me first. Perhaps no one did. When I started first grade, all of us students somehow knew not to use the washroom designated for us first graders. The school I went to from first to fourth grade was a small one. We had one social worker for all of the school population. I can't remember for sure, but I think there were only 3 classes for each level. The first grade level was situated outside, as in, when you went outside the classroom, the sky was your ceiling. The second, third, and fourth grades, on the other hand, were situated inside the school building. The shared washroom of the first grade level was in a separate small building behind the small building that contained our classrooms. Early on in the school year, I remember sitting in a circle at recess with a bunch of my classmates as one girl told us the score. The Jinn, you can't see them, but they live in bathrooms. In cupboards too, but mainly in bathrooms. Don't stay long in any bathroom when you use it. Don't sing in it, and don't make loud noises or stare at yourself in the mirror for too long. Be careful not to slip and fall. If you do, you might accidentally fall on a Jinn. They will be mad. Do your business and leave quickly. Don't bring toys or stuffed animals into the bathroom. Make sure not to let the door to the bathroom open. If you follow these rules, you will be fine. We have a lot of Jinn in our house. That's how I know these things. She went on. If you leave them alone and don't offend them, then they will leave you alone and won't hurt you. But the washroom here, it's no good. The Jinn there are already angry with us. Never go to our washroom. Hold it in till you get home. That's safer for you. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of that girl. I ended up visiting her once. The first of 2 times my mother allowed me to visit a friend in the course of my childhood, but that's a story for another day, and yet her name escapes me. All I remember is me staring into her face as she spoke, and being transfixed by the weight of her words and the color of her eyes. She was the only girl in our class with light eyes. They were a mesmerizing mixture of hazel and green. None of us talked about the angry Jinn in the first graders' washroom for the most part, but when we did, it was in whispers. Don't talk about it out loud, and don't talk about it for long. If you do, they will come for you, maybe even at your own home, in your own bed, in the middle of the night. After one too many incidents of students wetting themselves or sneaking into the bathrooms designated for the older kids, our class teacher, in the presence of the school principal and the social worker, tried to reassure us, first with words. The Jinn, like Iblis, are created from fire, she told us. They, just like humans, have the capacity to choose to do good or evil. They lived in an invisible world of their own. They only appear to prophets and holy men, though. So no, they don't live in the school washroom. Instinctively, we knew better. The adults were lying to us. When she saw that her empty words meant nothing to us, our class teacher decided to go with the punishment route. Whoever was heard talking about the Jinn in the washroom, or wet themselves because they were afraid of the Jinn in the washroom, or snuck into the older kids' washroom was summoned to the front of the class, scolded in front of everyone for telling stories or stupidly believing lies/breaking the rules, and then hit 10 times on each palm of their hands with the dreaded wooden ruler. The plastic ruler was usually used when we got punished. The wooden ruler was for especially bad misbehavior, and the metal ruler was supposedly used to dole out the most severe punishments, though I'm not sure our teacher ever used it. The fear of punishment meant that we talked even less about the threat we knew to exist, and devised ways not to have to use the washroom at school. For my part, I made sure to drink very little water during school hours. Some classmates made a pact with each other. If you just had to go to the washroom, wait till recess. Take 2 friends with you to the washroom, so that while you got inside the stall to do your business, they were outside reassuring you that you were not left alone with the Jinn, and they were ready to sprint and call for help if need be. One fateful day, I had no money to buy the usual chocolate or cheese croissant from the canteen at recess, and so I decided to drink the big strawberry juice box a friend offered me so I wouldn't go hungry for the rest of the school day. Our system at school at the time consisted of 6 periods. These started from 8 a.m. and ended at 2 p.m. After the 3rd period, at about 11:30 a.m., we had recess for half an hour, or so I remember. That day, I felt the discomfort of a full bladder. By the 5th period, I tried to project a calm exterior, but inside I was starting to panic a little bit. I told myself that I could make it till I reached home. When the bell rang and the last period began, our grade's much-hated the teacher entered the class and informed our class teacher that our class was to report to the nurse's office for our scheduled vaccination. I can't remember what we were to be vaccinated for, to be honest. At the sound of that, I became really distressed, and my bladder felt like it would release its content at any moment, though I still tried to hide it to the best of my ability. We were organized into lines and marched to the nurse's office, where we found the 1st graders from the other 2 classes there as well. There we stood in line to get our injections. I stood last and felt like I could not handle one more second. I started shivering despite all my attempts at self-control. The teacher looked at me with derision and mockingly asked me if I was scared of the injection. I shook my head no, and she laughed. She then asked me why I was shaking if I wasn't scared. That caught the attention of our class teacher, who noticed me shivering, and so did the other girls. By then I was about to pee myself. I was so scared of that happening because then I knew I was going to get punished by my teacher in front of everyone, and in those days the physical pain of corporal punishment terrified me, and that I would also be mocked mercilessly by my PE teacher, who would use it to humiliate me every PE period, which she did to other girls. That's when I said that I needed to use the bathroom. Frowning, my class teacher told me to go quickly and then come back straight for my shot. I wanted to ask her to let someone come with me to the washroom and then thought better of it. I went out of the nurse's office feeling strange. I felt numb but was panicking at the same time. I thought of going to the older kids' bathroom but was so scared I was going to get caught. The accursed washroom was a 5-minute walk away from the nurse's office. Since all the first graders, accompanied by their teachers, were getting their vaccinations, and our classrooms were far from the other levels' classrooms, no students or teachers would be around the washroom when I got there. I would be all alone there, just me and the Jinn. As I contemplated these thoughts, my legs did not stop moving. It was as if I was in one of those dreams where dread fills your heart and you know you are walking to your doom, but you can't do anything to stop yourself. Except this was reality. I reached my classroom and then walked around the building. When the washrooms building came to sight, I stopped. It wasn't run down, of course, but it was an old building with faded and peeling white paint. I could feel my heart start to sink and my brain screamed at me to turn back and leave. But I felt like there was no way out for me. The adults were giving me no choice, and I was just a scared child. I switched myself to autopilot, and my legs just moved. I entered the washrooms building and shut the door gently behind me. It was a swinging door, and so I could not leave it open. The washroom had a strange smell. Not particularly foul, but not nice either. Everything was faded shades of lime green. There were 6 stalls, and they were all open. 3 of them had Arabic-style toilets, and then the other 3 were Western-style toilets. I instinctively went for Western-style toilets, because that's what we had at home, and because I made a split-second decision that the Arabic-style toilets, which you had to squat over, would leave me exposed much more than the Western-style toilets. I entered the stall, closed the door, sat on the toilet, and started to pee. My bladder was very full, and it was taking me some time to empty it, and as seconds went by I was losing the numbness, and the fear was starting to foreground itself more and more in my brain. When I was finally done, I washed up and dried myself, but I hesitated to flush the toilet. Would the noise that caused make the Jinn angry? I quickly decided to close the lid of the toilet as a compromise, and then got out of the stall and closed its door behind me. I went to the basin to wash my hands quickly and get out of there, intent on making as little noise as possible. As soon as I turned on the water, though, my eye caught the mirror in front of the basin, and I noticed something. All the doors of the stalls were closed. I froze for a moment. All the stall doors were open when I got in. I knew they were. There were no footsteps of anything other than me during all the time I was in the washroom. As the horror of that realization dawned at me, I heard a creak. I watched in utter horror as the door to the stall that I used started slowly opening. As the door was opening, I glimpsed the lid of the toilet, the one I had closed, upright and open, and then I bolted out of there. Never ran so fast in my life. I don't remember much of what happened that day. I only remember that I was sick for a week. I didn't want to stay home from school, though, because that meant I would have to stay home alone till noon, since both my parents worked and my other siblings would be at school. I remember being so scared to tell anyone at school, for fear they would tell the teacher and I would get punished. I ended up only telling my light-eyed friend. She knew the truth, and so my secret was safe with her. Story 4. Lightning came down from the sky, hitting the man standing in the street directly in the center of his head. His wife and children started screaming from the sidewalk a few feet away, his young toddler putting out her hands towards her father and yelling, "Dada! Dada!" The mother was carrying the toddler, and her eyes were animalistic and uncomprehending as she looked at the smoking body in the street. The 6-year-old son stood next to the mother, not saying or doing anything, his eyes simply wide and shell-shocked as he kept staring at his father's remains. I was frightened the entire time, realizing how badly things were going now. This was not how I imagined things would go. The sound of pouring rain and heavy thunder gave the world a muffling effect. All I could smell was charred meat from the father's body mixing with springtime flowers and rainstorms. The combination was absolutely nauseating. I thought I might throw up if I had to smell that burning body smell for a moment longer. As if in slow motion, I saw the body of the father fall to its knees, its arms hanging limply by its sides, its face a blackened, smoking mask of fused skin and blood. The body stayed there, looking like it was praying, then mercifully fell face first onto the pavement. I knew I would see that face in my nightmares forever. His wife immediately put down the toddler, who was wailing, then instinctually ran into the road without looking. I was on the same side of the road as her and started sprinting down the sidewalk towards the family. As she stepped out into the road, a tractor trailer that had been coming around the corner tried to stop, seeing a man's body in the road, but the mass of the vehicle was far too great to stop at such a short distance. The driver twisted the wheel and, with a cacophony of shrieking metal, it began to flip. Within a fraction of a second, both the wife and the husband had disappeared from view under the ripping, shredding metal of the trailer. Sparks flew in every direction as my ears rang from all the noise. I had reached the kids and pulled them back from the sidewalk, forcing them onto the lawn directly behind it as they both put their arms out and began screaming. I don't know what the tractor trailer had been carrying, but it immediately began to catch fire. Explosions rocking the street as I dragged the kids to the nearest house and got them safely inside. The resident of the house came running downstairs, and I screamed at them to call the police. Later that day, I was back home. I took a hot shower and tried to forget what I had seen. It had all gone terribly wrong. I had wanted them dead, but I never imagined it would go so badly. I dried off and dressed for the ritual, entering the basement and taking out the spell book, The Shadows of Solomon. I felt sick and scared at the prospect of having to encounter the creature again, but I knew I couldn't stop now. I was already in too deep. This book had been passed down within my family for countless centuries. Very few people even knew of its existence. My mother and grandmother always warned me to never use it except as a last resort. They seemed as terrified of it as I was. As I took it out of the safe, I felt the leathery, black cover, made of human skin. I opened the book, and its pages shone out with their radiant whiteness. I marveled at how the book never seemed to age, the pages never drying out or cracking, the cover never needing any maintenance. It was as if it were a living thing that could heal itself. I had never seen another book quite like it. Every time I touched it, an instinctual dread shot through my body. It was as if my flesh knew it was an evil thing. I wish I had listened to my instincts. I did the ritual to bring the Jinn back, drawing the pentagram with human blood and chanting the proper words in Aramaic. The stuffy basement seemed to open up into something the size of a football field as the consciousness of the Jinn entered. At first, it looked like a mist was gathering in front of me, directly outside the safety of the star. But it wasn't a mist at all, I knew. It was smokeless fire, a kind that most people could never see unless the Jinn allowed it. "A war," I said, calling the name of the Jinn, and he answered. "I am here, daughter," he said, and his body solidified. He looked like a man and a snake had merged, floating above the ground. He had the body of a man, with legs and arms, but his skin had scales, and his eyes and nose were those of a snake. He had countless serrated teeth and 3 bone-white horns extending out of his forehead. Why did it go so wrong today? I asked. I never wanted them to die in such a horrible way in front of their own children. He simply smiled, an ear-to-ear grin that showed his dozens of shark-like teeth. My heart pounded, and I felt infuriated and terrified at his expression. I knew he didn't care in the slightest. "What is your next wish, daughter of Eve?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension and arrogance. "I have eliminated the ones your husband was cheating on you with, the neighbors of sickness. Should I now eliminate the source of the sickness as well?" I knew I had to be very literal when speaking with Jinn. If I said yes, for all I knew, he could use that interpretation to get rid of me, if he could twist the meaning somehow to make me the source of sickness. I had known for quite a while my husband was having threesomes with the neighbors. I could never look at him the same. Not only was he cheating, but he was clearly not even straight. How could I have married such a man? It made me sick to my stomach to think about it, even now. And it was certainly no wonder we had such problems in our marriage. I knew he was the cause of all the problems. But my terror fought my hatred for control of my mind. I still had a chance to simply banish the Jinn, return to my normal life, and get a divorce. I knew it had gone too far, however. "I wish for you to kill my husband, without me being in any way a suspect to the police or dying as a result of whatever kills him," I said. The Jinn smiled. Then his body dissipated back into a fog-like substance. The room returned to a normal basement. I was just a scared, naked woman sitting in the middle of a bloody star in an almost totally bare basement now. Looking out the basement window, I saw a small, smooth face staring in at me. My heart leaped in my chest, but as soon as I blinked, the face was gone. What the hell was that? I wondered to myself. Then I heard my husband's car pulling into the driveway and slamming the door. Seconds later, he was yelling upstairs. "Mary," he said. He sounded as if he were crying. "Did you hear about what happened to the Palmers?" I quickly grabbed a bucket of water, washing the blood off the basement floor and allowing it to flow down a drain in the center of the room. I felt a rising sense of panic. He wasn't supposed to be home this early. I was just finishing cleaning up as he came down the stairs. "Mary, what are you doing down here?" he asked. I just shook my head. "Looking for something I lost," I said quickly, and we went back upstairs. We decided to go on a walk around the block. My husband, John, kept crying about the deaths. He had no idea that I knew about him cheating on me with them, however. I played the part of a supportive wife, hugging him and reassuring him. "So where are the kids going?" I asked, referring to the toddler and the 6-year-old boy, the 2 Palmer children. John shrugged. "Luke and Jenna have an aunt and uncle a couple streets down," he said. "They're going to stay with them for a while." Then I heard a soft sob from behind me. I looked back and saw the 6-year-old standing there, a huge revolver in his tiny hands. He was pointing it directly at me. I froze, a wave of anxiety going through me. "Hey, now, Luke," John said, walking towards the little boy. "Put down the gun." Luke shook his head, saying nothing. He wouldn't even look at John. His eyes only focused on me. "She killed my parents," he said in a small voice. John shook his head. "No, buddy, I'm sorry, but a truck killed your parents, and that was a freak accident," John said. He put his hands up. "Please, just put down the gun and we can talk about this, okay?" He kept inching closer, then lunged for it. Luke panicked and fired a shot, which hit John directly in the center of his chest. My ears were ringing still, but I could hear John coughing up blood, the sound of fluid dripping out of his body and landing on the ground before he collapsed. I stared down the sidewalk at Luke, putting my hands up. "We both know what you did," Luke said and fired. Everything went black. I woke up later, the beeping of hospital equipment all around me. I tried to move, but I couldn't feel anything. My face felt flushed and hot. I turned my head and saw a nurse coming into the room. She stopped suddenly, her eyes widening. "Oh, you're awake," she said. I nodded. My mouth was so dry. The nurse ran out and got me some ice chips to suck on, and soon a doctor came in to talk to me. "I'm sorry, Mary," he said, "but the bullet hit you in the spine. You are paralyzed." I began to cry. "Also, your husband died as a result of the injury. He didn't even make it into surgery." The doctor shook his head sadly. "A terrible thing, really. The whole thing is just so sad." I turned away from him, looking out the hospital window. I saw the Jinn of war there, his snake-like eyes staring in at me, his mouth a lunatic grin of pure delight. I saw him mouth the words to me, "Only one more wish for you, daughter of Eve." Story 5. Where I come from, we don't believe in ghosts or spirits. We have our own frightening creatures. We call them jinns. In my culture, they are said to have houses, families, and communities, just like humans. Some of them are good and some are evil. But the most frightening thing about them is that they live among us, but we cannot see them and they can't see us. And as long as they can't see us, we are safe. Otherwise, they have the ability to harm us or even do much worse. As a 45 years old man, I consider myself a logical and practical person. But when I was a kid, I believed everything people said about jinns. But as I grew older, I began to doubt the existence of those mythical creatures. For me, it was just a creepy story made up by ancient and ignorant people to scare children. So I just stopped believing in jinns and never paid much attention to jinn stories. I believe only what I see. Or so I thought, until last week. I work as a taxi driver and prefer to work the night shift because it is cooler in the evenings and at night in my country. But also because night drives cost twice as much as day drives, and because the drunk people I occasionally drive tip me generously. One night at the end of August, I was driving along a narrow, winding road heading towards the suburbs of the city. It was past 2 a.m., and although it was almost the end of my shift, I said to myself, "One more customer and I'm going home." It was one of those warm late summer nights. The streets were deserted. I had my forearm half out and was holding a barely touched joint in my hand when I saw, under the light of a street lamp, the silhouette of a woman. As I got closer to her, she waved for me to stop. What's a lonely woman doing outside at this hour? I wondered. I stopped alongside the woman and leaned over to the side of the passenger seat and rolled down the window. "I want to go downtown," the woman said before I even talked. "Which side of the city center?" I asked her while scanning her from head to toe. It is a very important skill in my profession to be able to profile the people we drive. This is how we identify thieves and criminals. My coworkers always make fun of me and refer to me as Eagle Eyes. If there was one thing I was most proud of in my 20 years as a taxi driver, it was that I had never been robbed. The woman was rather old, maybe in her late 50s. She had no distinguishing features and was holding nothing in her hands. She was dressed in a long-sleeve dress in white or beige. It was difficult to tell due to the dim light from the street lamp. "The Rialto Cinema, in front of the kiosk," the woman said. "Come in," I said as I opened the back door. I saw her come in from the corner of my eye and then quietly close the door behind her. I stepped on the gas and drove to my destination. The woman began speaking as soon as she sat. "How's life?" inquired the lady. I responded without thinking. "Life sucks. Nothing is worth living for. Everything is a problem, and everyone wants your skin. Some days, I just want to die to put an end to it all." And, as if the floodgates had just opened, I began telling her about my marital problems, my financial difficulties, my mother, the mortgage, and the disagreement I was having with the taxi owner. The woman remained silent. She said to me when I finished complaining, "Do you want to die quickly, like right now? Or do you want time to say goodbye to your loved ones?" This strange question took me by surprise. I never considered suicide seriously. For a few seconds, I was lost in this strange thought when I noticed two silhouettes waving at me to stop a little further ahead on the deserted road. One of the men was tall, while the other was short and skinny. I got closer to them without even realizing it, most likely due to a taxi driver's automatic reflex. I was about to stop when I remembered I had a passenger in my taxi. In my country, we are allowed to pick up to 3 passengers, but I never pick up a man when I have a female client in my taxi. I then changed my mind and waved at the 2 men to apologize, and I continued on my way. I was completely absorbed in this strange conversation with the woman when I noticed we had arrived in front of the movie theater's kiosk. I came to a complete stop and checked the rearview mirror to inform the woman that she had arrived at her destination. She wasn't there. I spun around. The back seat was completely empty. My blood chilled, and a shiver ran through my body. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I flung open the door and dashed to the other side of the road. That is not possible. There was a lady in my taxi. I was conversing with her. I stood there panting, my heart pounding in my chest and my eyes bulging, inspecting the vehicle without daring to approach it. "Hey man, what's going on?" The voice startled me. It was the cinema's security guard, a burly, inquisitive-looking man, who noticed me abruptly stopping the taxi and fleeing. I took 2 steps back, still stunned. He approached me and asked, "Are you okay?" I looked at my taxi, whose engine was still running, terrified. There was a woman in my taxi, and she disappeared. Just like that. The agent shifted his gaze to the taxi and then to me, looking at me intently. "I didn't see any women exit your taxi," the security guard stated calmly. "Perhaps what you're smoking there is a little too strong," he added, shaking his chin at the joint between my fingers. I looked at the security guard, not sure what he was saying. It took me a few seconds to realize I was still holding the nearly extinguished joint. I threw it as far as I could, as if afraid it would contaminate me. My legs became weak all of a sudden. I knelt on the ground and sat on the sidewalk. I cradled my head in my still trembling hands. My shirt was soaked in sweat, even though I was shivering. The security guard, who remained nearby, said to me, "I'll go check out." He then walked over to the cab, circled it, and peered through the windows inside before ducking down to look under it. He raised his head and shrugged his shoulders at me. He then tucked in an arm on the driver's side, turned off the engine, took the keys, lifted the handbrake, and shut the door. He returned to me and handed me the keys. He took his pack of cigarettes from his pocket and handed it to me after some hesitation. "Take one. It will help you relax. I raised my head and reached for a cigarette, but my hand was trembling so badly that I couldn't grasp the cigarette. When the security guard saw me like this, he lit a cigarette and handed it to me. I nodded gratefully and took a long drag as I stared at his taxi across the street, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Then I told the agent everything. Could that woman be a Jinn? Wondered the security guard. What? I stumbled. How else do you explain a person who talked to you and then just vanished? I'm not sure. I couldn't think of anything to say. All of my logical reasoning was rendered useless. It must have been a long night's work, huh? Said the security guard after a moment, then added, You should go home for the time being. Sure, you're right, I responded. After I finished my cigarette, I decided to leave my taxi where it was and walk home. My story quickly spread throughout the taxi driver community. We laughed and made countless jokes about it. Some have even labeled their joints Eagle Eyes quality. A few weeks passed and my story, like all others, was forgotten. Until last week. I was sitting with some friends in one of downtown's coffee shops where many drivers stopped for a break. A burly, inquisitive-looking man approached me. Is that really you, Eagle Eyes? I frowned, trying to recall where I had seen the man. It's me, rushed the man, the Rialto Cinema security guard. Yes, I recall you. I responded, surprised. I looked everywhere for you. The man took a newspaper from his jacket pocket and placed it in front of me. Take a look at this. He then showed me an article from the newspaper's front page. The article was about the arrest of two criminals who wreaked havoc in isolated suburbia over the summer. The killers apprehended their victims late at night, posing as in need of help, robbed them of their belongings, and murdered them with machetes. They dumped their victims in pits away from the road and covered them in dirt. I politely inquired of the man, I'm not sure why you're showing this to me. The security guard tapped the bottom of the page with his index finger. In the spot where the man tapped, it said, The killers confessed that all of the victims apprehended were attacked on the same spot, with no chance of escape. With the exception of one taxi driver who was about to stop in front of them one night at the end of August. That one was lucky. It was as if a Jinn had stolen him from us, said one of the killers to the police. A photograph showed them being driven back to a police vehicle. One was tall, while the other was very short and skinny. My heart sank into my stomach. I'm doomed. When I looked up, the security guard gave me a concerned look, because we both know. If you can see a Jinn, they can see you too. Story 6. Okay. A brief history about who I am. Someone born in a Middle Eastern country and worked her ass off to run away and move to Europe. English isn't my native language, so bear with me, guys. It is going to be a long ride, so buckle up. I came here to do my MA and I was paired with another girl from my country by my university advisor as we went through the same problems with visa blah blah. The first day we met, the only thing I thought about her was that she was a little bit of a nutcase, like thinking she was a reptilian, whatever the fuck that means. She explained she had many past lives in which she suffered from traumatizing or tragic events like being raped as a kid or being a crippled nun who lived in the medieval times and murdered by someone. She believed that she was even attacked by a snake-looking creature from a lower dimension. The thing attacked her heart chakra or something. As a kind of healthy individual, I found it funny and laughed it off, thinking that she's weird but in a funny way. I mean, who the hell wants to give such a first impression? Yet, my biggest mistake was to think she was harmless. 2 months after our first encounter, I found a flat with 2 rooms. I had been sleeping on the couch of a relative here and thought it was a good chance for me because the room that I wanted was super nice and cheap. The landlady said she liked me quite a lot, but she said she didn't want to deal with finding another person for the other room. So she asked me if I knew someone to move in with me. Otherwise, she would have to choose some other people. Again, a mistake. I knew that girl, let's call her Jane, was also looking for a room. I asked her. She happily accepted it, and we moved in. First few months up until the whole corona thing happened, everything seemed okay. I was out doing some university stuff during the day, and at night we smoked weed together and had fun. Yet, there was something unsettling about her. She would be dead silent in her room for a few days. She would not even go out to eat. I would be worried and text her, and she would just say she was okay. She was a massively depressed person, and I just didn't want to bother her, and got used to these weird intervals. One night we smoked again, and she started to talk about her jinns. She told me back in our country, many people around her saw some supernatural shit happening, like furniture moving, glasses breaking. She explained that she had found one of her cats dead, and it wasn't a normal death. The cat was totally torn into pieces. I asked her if it was attacked by a dog or something. No, it wasn't, because they found the cat right in the middle of their living room. I am telling you guys, I was shit scared that night. You know, smoking weed doesn't help either. Anyway, I went back to my room to get some sleep and try to watch something funny to distract myself until I started to hear the noises coming from her room. It was like someone was deliberately dropping stuff on the ground. I got up to check to see if she was okay. Before leaving my room, I heard the thudding on my window. There wasn't anything in front of the window that could make that noise. I was shocked and scared to move. The moment I was just gonna open the door and maybe run out of the building, someone knocked on my door. It was Jane. Asked if she could come in with a shivering voice. I invited her, and she said she couldn't sleep in her room as the stuff on her table was falling on the ground one by one, and she was scared as hell. I accepted it, and we just tried to stay up as long as we could. We, of course, fell asleep. Nothing happened for a few weeks after that night. We talked about it, and she said it was her jinns attached to her and playing with her. She believed that the things grow stronger if you talk about them or utter their names often. I tried to refrain from that topic and moved on. I am an atheist, but I didn't know what to do, so I found some verses for protection from the Quran and read them every night. Even though nothing happened after that night, I realized that she stopped cleaning. She would just eat, chunk the dishes with half-eaten, or sometimes rotten food in the sink. If I didn't clean anything, the whole house would smell like freaking dead rats. Yet even when I cleaned, there was this weird, egg-like smell all around the house, coming from her room. I asked her a few times about it. She said she didn't smell anything. I felt like I was crazy or something. Anyway, this not cleaning thing became even worse during the lockdown. We had nowhere to go, so we were constantly at home. It was getting messy every other day. I was the only one to clean, of course. One day I lashed out and screamed at her. We had a huge fight, and she blamed me with ridiculous things like eating her food, stealing her stuff. Like, dude, we live in the same house. If I steal your clothes, you will probably see me wearing that. Being fed up with her BS, I said I wanted her out and didn't want to be friends with her. This was when the hell broke loose. At first, I really thought we would be just two civilized people not talking to each other, but still being able to live together. I had my experiences living with total strangers, so I was okay with that. Yet, again, I realized that she wasn't eating, drinking, or even going out of her room even to take a dump for days. She changed the lights in her room into something like a crimson red. When she didn't sit in the dark, which she usually does, I could see the red light because we both have frosted glasses on our doors. I thought the creep was being a creep again. Didn't care much. But for fuck's sake, I don't know if you believe in the number 33, but I just realized that whenever I woke up in the middle of the night after a nightmare, or whenever I checked the time, it was always like 1313, or 303, or 1433. I called my boyfriend, who is currently stuck in England, and asked him if he knew what it could be. He has a little bit of an interest in numerology, and he said I might be warned about something sinister coming up. I was getting more freaked out as the rotten egg smell was back worse than before. Almost every night I was having sleep paralysis. It wasn't the first time for me, as I had been a kid with a vivid imagination and I had had this before. But it was so frequent that it started to affect my daily life. The monster or the ghost, or I don't know, whatever you would call it, was the same one from my childhood nightmares. When I woke up, I would see a girl sitting at the edge of my bed, dressed up in a white dress. I could only see her arms from her dress. Her flesh looked like a corpse found rotting in the sea. You know, like in the movies, really pale, almost like purple-colored. All the blood drawn out, and some parts of the skin of her arms were just falling off. Her hair would cover her face because she would never lift her up. I would try to scream or move, but nothing would work. To snap out of it, I tried to close my eyes and counted to 10. When I opened my eyes, I saw her crawling towards me, her hair covering her face. I did the same thing again, telling myself that it was just the sleep paralysis like I had before. No avail. She was getting closer each time I closed my eyes. Every single second I tried to keep my eyes open, my heart was racing faster, seeing her just on her hands and knees right above me and coming closer to my face. I don't know what happened, but I think I fainted at the end. In the morning, I started to search for stuff related to jinns. Here's some of the stuff I found out. I translated it from my language. Asterisk, they definitely love dirty places and leftovers, and they live in the dark. They are filthy creatures created out of the smoke of the devil's fire. They would be something close to the demons in the Western culture. Asterisk, they might look like human beings, but to be able to understand, you can check their feet. They will be backwards. Asterisk, they live in tribes. They even have religions. The ones who believe in God and the holy books are mostly harmless. They also dwell in our world, but are not visible to the normal people. The Quran explains that if humans could see every single creature dwelling in our world, there wouldn't be a single unoccupied spot. So they are basically everywhere. Asterisk, some of them are infidels, despise God, and they are really spiteful. With the right spell and practice, you can basically make them do anything. They can torture your enemy's soul, make you rich, give you the healthiest baby. Yet this isn't easy, and those who practice it will probably die in the worst ways possible. This is seen as the golden ticket to the depths of hell in Islam. Asterisk, it all starts with hearing voices when someone curses you, or somehow they attach themselves onto you. First, they wear you down by scaring you with small things like changing the places of the stuff, breaking glasses, making noises at night. Then, when you start to lose your shit, they increase the level. You start to see things, can't distinguish between reality and dream. I couldn't stand loading my brain with this anymore and closed the tabs. I tried to work a little bit. I was actually quite distracted. I focused on my work and didn't understand that it was getting dark and the nightmare was gonna continue. It was around 10 p.m., 10:33, I heard someone was trying to unlock my door. The thing is that I am the only one who has the key for my room. and I am sure that I never ever left my keys around. Normally, I wouldn't lock my door, but I was honestly scared of my flatmate. The key was on the freaking lock, so there was no way that I left it outside. I mean, how could I lock myself in the room if the key was outside anyway? I got up and went to the door, just to see if I could distinguish anything from the glass. There was nothing, but someone kept trying to put the key in the lock. The key in my room was shaking and about to fall. I tried to hold it there while whoever was on the other side of the door was trying harder. Then the chanting started. My window has a view of the communal garden. It is surrounded by 10 buildings. It is not a big area, so basically whatever you say in the garden will be heard by almost everyone. But I freaking swear, I could tell that there were some people in the garden, probably really close to my window, chanting in Arabic. I didn't know what they said. I don't speak Arabic. I couldn't go and see what it was as I was busy with trying to key in the lock. I knew I was fucked up, and I had to find a way out of this room.